Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Sky U Pod, off-season edition, your college huddle Gopher football podcast. As always, Kurt, Max, and I were joined talking some Gopher football, sharing it with all you. Very exciting, fellas. 171 days until kickoff against Buffalo. I already can't wait. How you both doing, Max? How you doing?
Doing good. Weather's warming up. It's starting to feel like spring. And no, there won't be an actual spring game, but excited to look forward to some actual news out of spring ball once that starts. And the spring transfer window's in April, right? Is that when it opens up again
Yeah,
sometime?
pretty much immediately right after
All in
spring
spring.
practice, I think.
Sure. So yeah, hopefully nothing too crazy coming out of that. But yeah,
Gertie,
I'm
how
doing
you
good.
doing, man?
I'm doing good. I don't know if this is live on Twitter or not. Twitter's been up and down all day as far as their servers and stuff go. So Elon says they're getting a cyber attack. So if you're seeing this on Twitter, thanks for joining. If not, no biggie. We'll see you next time. I'm doing good. I've shared this with you guys, but I want to say this to our fans, to our listeners here. I've kind of gotten into collecting some Gopher football cards here. I've been going for some autos. I'm scared to share that because I already feel like the prices are ridiculous on some of these cards as it is, and I'm a Gopher fan, but we'll leave that there. I think a good idea, though, because there's clearly a demand for sports memorabilia. It makes some people a lot of money. A lot of people are into it. I know they recently started up and like you can buy packs of Gopher football cards with like the current players on it and whatever, and like you can get some autos and some different stuff, which is all cool. But like for me, looking for like past Gophers, like an example is Damian Wilson. I've had a hard time finding any Gopher football cards of Damian Wilson. I feel like an easy like Dinkytown Athletes initiative would be like get some of these old alumni, make some cards up, and put it available to like the fans to buy. Like autograph. Like part of it goes back to maybe the player, part of it goes straight to Dinkytown Athletes themselves. Feels like a good win-win here for fans, players, and current players that would benefit off the money you could raise off that. Um, so I guess I'm just making a pitch here to Dinkytown Athletes. You should hit up your former players, get some cards, because there's a lot of guys from that era, like even the Mason era, that don't have, from what I can see, football cards signed, and I'm looking to buy. So think about it.
Yeah, I think it's a gold mine, Gertie. I think that you're onto something, and maybe that can be our contribution to the collective if we
That's
started
right. Good
something like
ideas.
that. So, if any of you listeners know any car manufacturers,
Yeah.
just a comment or email or something.
I do want to
Um,
ask our listeners this, and I
yeah,
love the guy, so I'm not ripping on the player. Would any of you pay $150 for a signed Rodney Smith card, even if it's like a one of eight or whatever, a super rare card? And I love Rodney Smith, but
no.
I saw that one listed. I even messaged the guy on eBay, and I thought, hey man, like how much do you actually want for this card? Like, I looked it up. You can filter by sales. There's not a lot of people buying up Rodney Smith cards at this point, right? I think pro cards are the bigger sell right now anyway. But I shot him an offer for like $10, and
I think that's very generous.
he shot it down immediately. It was a no go, and so it sits there. I mean, it's still there. I'm just curious if any fan out there, what would you pay for that? Would you pay $200 for a rare Rodney Smith auto card? I'm just curious. If you are, let us know in the comment section. But I just thought, and I love Rodney, but I just don't know who's gonna put up that price there.
tough
Yeah,
to
I
project the future value of a Rodney
Yeah,
Smith card.
of a guy that I don't think is in the league right now. I don't believe, but
I don't think
That
so.
says all you need to know.
yeah,
I thought he was with like Detroit for a time, and then
Well, he was with the Carolina Panthers, and he got some playing time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I don't think it's stuck, but
yeah. Well, if you're out there, Rodney, listening, we love you. One of the greatest backs of our time.
right.
And if you have cards yourself, if you don't mind autographing it and
Yeah,
donating it to the podcast, we'd
that's right.
appreciate it too. Well, fellas, let's talk some off-season football here. We got our first topic, and it's about the QB room here at the university. Fellas, we know what we have through Lindsey and the new transfer quarterback out of Georgia Tech, Zach Pyron. Um, my first question is, do you think that there is a true quarterback competition that is open, especially starting here in spring ball? PJ sort of commented that our offense is going to be centered around the quarterback. At least that's how he envisions it from now on. And to me, that kind of goes beyond, I guess, just like, the tangibles of a quarterback. Like there's leadership. Literally, your skill set is probably the focus of the whole entire offense. So, I guess with that being said, given what we know about these two quarterbacks, who we assume one of them will be the starter, do you think that there is an open competition?
Well, I think that in the coach's eyes, I think Drake Lindsey is the starter. I know PJ was just on the Big Ten, like you mentioned, said it's a wide open competition, and maybe it should be. I just think that they really want Drake Lindsey to be that guy. And I'm not saying it's like a mountain that Zach Pyron has to come in here as a transfer and overcome. But I think that, that Drake Lindsey is going to get the first team reps right away off the get go, just from being here a whole year. They kept talking about how much he was what I can't remember what they said. He was attached to Brosmer's side, is what they were saying, just like a sponge absorbing as much as he could. So, yeah, Zach Pyron's definitely got the experience edge, and I don't think like if Lindsey comes out struggling in spring practice, I don't think it would take super long for him to get a serious look at one. But if you're asking me straight up, is it a dead even, like wide open race? I don't. I think the coaches do have a preference for Drake Lindsey to take over.
Yeah, it's definitely got to be Lindsey's job to lose, right? Like he still has to earn it, and it's not like Pyron is just going to be locked in as the backup. But yeah, and I I think to some extent too, right? Like PJ kind of has to say it's an open competition just because, I mean, if you know you're going to be the starting quarterback, like what does that do to your mentals and your focus going into spring
Right.
ball too? So to an extent, like yeah, it's not truly open, but it's definitely got to be more Lindsey and just I mean, I know Pyron's got the experience advantage, but Lindsey being in the offense for a year and like you said, kind of studying under Max, who was like supposed to be this mental wizard. So hopefully he kind of picked up on some of what he did and just his, I guess his routine and his preparation too, and being able to study defenses and actually understand the offense at that level. Whereas Pyron's coming in has got to learn a brand new offense and try to figure it out and get to know all the players on the team even too. So
Right.
um, yeah, it seems like it's definitely going to be Lindsey's job to lose. I hope they both. I hope they make it a tough decision, right? Like you want both guys to be that good and perform that well to make it.
Yeah.
They could both start if needed. So
Well,
Yeah.
and kind of to what you were saying there, and then Spencer, I'll let you jump in on this. Like, you don't get a lot of benefit of just coming out and naming Lindsey the starter, right? One, you want him to push for it, and not saying he wouldn't, but like you just don't want to hand it to him. And two, if he does come out spring practice and it's clear that he's not your best option, you're not gonna want to like just kill his confidence by like trying to force him in there. Comes out in spring ball and he's clearly not ready yet. That's just going to tank his confidence by making it a competition. Then he's actually got to work for it rather than trying to be handed the job and failing. That's gonna affect your demeanor a lot more rather than just losing out an actual true QB battle, which I think this one, like we said, basically is. But Lindsey's definitely got the leg up.
Yeah. I agree. here's the thing for me. I think selfishly, I do want Lindsey to be the starter because of what you said, Kurt. He's kind of taking the back seat, watching Brosmer, who had a great year, learned from him. And I feel like the skill set for Lindsey, specifically on his feet, I think that he can be a little more athletic than maybe Brosmer was. It's to be seen, but I just think that, he's capable of that. But I do gotta say, Pyron, he is able to move around the pocket and avoid sacks, and that's something that he did a good job at. But the problem is his consistency. I saw a lot of kind of short and intermediate passes at Georgia Tech that he's thrown and done well, but very inconsistent with the deep ball. Now, granted, if you're last year, we didn't really throw the deep ball much, and if we just want to rely on that this next year, I guess that's okay. But if we really want to see this offense kind of expand and go beyond of what it has been, we need to get that deep threat going. And I'm just not convinced that from what I've seen on tape that he is able to do that. And with Lindsey, though we don't have much tape on it either, I just feel like him learning from Brosmer, him being in the system for the past year, him being young and having opportunity to grow still, I think ideally he's the guy. Um, but I do think that it should be a competition between the two. It kind of fires you up. You really get to see good reps. You get to see who is the better quarterback. And, I'm just hoping it's not like, we've seen this in college football, you know, you put in a quarterback for a few drives and then you go to the next quarterback. And I don't want to see
Oh,
that sort of back and forth sort of thing. And that's talking beyond this open
right.
quarterback battle. But I hope it's just really solidified who's the guy and they have the confidence to kind of take us places over the course of the season.
I agree. I think Pyron, just with his mobility, I think he's gonna play either way, even if he
Sure.
doesn't win the job. Looking at his old highlights, Georgia Tech, um, he had multiple games with over 60 yards rushing, and he's not like a speed demon. He's just a tough physical runner. I mean, he moves a lot better than what we've had at quarterback for sure. But so that's a nice wrinkle to have if he does get the job. But yeah, I think that is probably a selling point for Zach Pyron to get here. You give him a shot at the starting job, and then also like, hey, we also really like what you do. I think he'll be used, as like your goal line, and not even strictly wildcat. I just think he'll be in there to run like more of a read option, where it's not just our quarterback standing there looking at the D end and not ever going to pull it like we've seen in the past. But
Right. Yeah. Um, well, let's kind of just talk, kind of branching off of this. What if Pyron is the starter opening day against Buffalo? Is that concerning, do you think? Or do you think that's a legitimate win and he's probably the guy that, being a redshirt junior, he might be the guy for the next, I guess, 2 seasons?
Um, yeah, I mean, there's a chance that Pyron really is just that much better than Lindsey and earns it, but it does feel like it's more likely that Drake just didn't prove enough or didn't show enough or didn't gain enough trust in the coaching staff to be able to earn the starting job. And I would probably be disappointed just because we've heard a lot about Lindsey coming up the last couple of years. He was like the the guy coming in. He was going to be the next one after Brosmer. We had all last year of him, hearing all about the time he spent with Max and how good he was looking and how he was progressing, and then all of that to just come to an end with a transfer quarterback coming in from Georgia Tech, but kind of just be a dud, I guess.
right, yeah.
So
Well, there's a let's be honest. There's like maybe an unfair stigma to just like you bring in a transfer that was a backup at another Power Four school
right,
that like wasn't Ohio State or Alabama or like a top tier team, right? And so you're hoping like, okay, like good depth to what we already have because we've been hyping up our own guy. So there's like this unfair already probably like stigma attached to if Zach does just outright win it.
right. Like
Um,
it'd just be bad optics overall. Like
yeah, but like program concerns, I wouldn't be concerned if he's not like ready per se, like just right away. Like
sure,
I mean, but definitely disappointed, right? I mean, like you mentioned, big arm coming out of high school. He threw for over 4,000 yards. I think it was like almost 50 touchdowns. It was like 40 some touchdowns his senior year, and I think he won Arkansas Gatorade Player of the Year. But like, I do think there's a chance that Zach's abilities could suit him better for the starting job, just based on how the rest of the team looks around him. We've already mentioned Zach's mobility. Like, you know, we're coming off a year where the O line really struggled, and we have at least two guys that are probably going to be drafted, potentially three. And for whatever reason, it wasn't meshing, and now you're bringing a bunch of transfers. So I'm just saying, like, we feel good about the O line just based on what we brought in, but we felt good last year and didn't perform. I think there's a scenario just based off his experience, his toughness running the football, where, like, if your O line's really struggling again, it might not even be a Drake Lindsay development issue. It might be that Zach Pyron just needs to be the starter because your O line is struggling to protect Lindsay and he's not as mobile as Zach Pyron. I do think that's a real possibility. I'm not saying it's a high probability of happening, but I do think there are other factors like that to consider. But if Zach does win the job, I watched his first start against Virginia Tech. He is mobile. He runs tough. You know who he runs a lot like? Because he takes a lot of high shots. He runs like Mitch Leidner. And people might be down on that, but you look back at Mitch Leidner's career, I think he had over 1,400 career rushing yards. So he was no slouch running the football. He's a physical runner. That's who he runs like to me. Now, the passing game, I only watched one game. It wasn't bad. He actually, they run a lot of like quick read, RPO, flick out stuff, and then shots down the field. And he actually hit like his first three deep shots, but it wasn't like driven in there, right? Like, I wouldn't say it was like a big strong arm throw. He was able to float it, but lead them, right? Which is okay if you can actually be accurate like that. Where Lindsey's upside is more like he does have the big arm. He can drive it into those windows. We're hoping to create more explosive gains out of the passing game with him as the quarterback this year compared to Brosmer, who was more of a quick hitting intermediate type player, right? So that's like the differences in passing styles, I think. I don't think it's like Pyron can't take shots down the field. It's just he probably can't drive it there on a line like how we've seen Lindsey do, at least at high school. I know college is way different, but um, you know, Drake's a big kid, so that's kind of the hope there. But yeah, I want it to be Drake Lindsey's job for sure, just with the hype behind it. But if Zach Pyron's the guy, I'm not gonna lie, I was more impressed than I thought I would be just looking into him. I kind of got excited about just how physical he is, and there was more in the passing game than I thought I would see. I'll say that.
Yeah. I think, yeah, it's a good problem to have two potentially solid quarterbacks in your room, right? Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I guess, if Pyron is the starter of at the start of the season, I'd be fine with it. Again, I'd like to see Lindsey there selfishly, but again, at the end of the day, we all just want to see some wins. And however we get there, we'll be okay with whoever's behind the center.
Do you guys think that that's a possibility that the supporting crew potentially, I want to say lets down Lindsey, but is better suited for Zach than Lindsey?
I think that you made a very good point, Kurt, when at the beginning of last year, it did seem like probably Pyron would have kind of flourished in an offense like that because the offensive line wasn't very cohesive at that point. And he's a physical, runner, so I think that's better suited than to try and sit in the pocket and make plays. It could be, and I think you're right. It could be to the detriment of Lindsey. If the offensive line comes out this season and they're not looking that good, and we can't, be super effective, through the air or even on the ground, like it wasn't that great at the beginning of the year, why not kind of lump in those RPOs that,
Right.
obviously he has experience with. We're always going to be good at in the running back position. And now you have a quarterback that can do well on his legs too. So, yeah, that's a great point, and I don't think that can be overlooked.
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely a fair observation to say, like, the more mobile quarterback is probably going to survive a weaker offensive line. But if that is the case, I mean, then we just have bigger problems to to
Right.
go down
Yeah.
that road. So that's kind of scary too to think about. But I mean, it is nice if we have that, kind of as our backup option. If things don't go our way up front, then we got a guy that can you know
Yeah.
can last, I guess.
And watch that. Go back and watch that game. The whole thing's on YouTube. I just fast forwarded to all of his. When Georgia Tech was on offense, he's just eating up high hits, and he's a true freshman at this point. Like he's a big guy, but he doesn't have to eat all that.
Yeah.
If I had to put a percentage to kind of move us off this, and you guys can give yours, I would put it at like a almost like a 68% chance that it's Drake Lindsey, the starter,
Yeah.
week
I'd
one.
say 65-35, chance
Yeah,
with favoring Lindsay.
right. Okay, Max, what
Yeah,
do you think?
yeah. Probably rather. I'd probably say 70% Lindsay.
Okay, we're all on the
Um,
same page.
but okay, and you put this in our notes before. What are things that each quarterback has to do to like say, all right, you're the guy? What are some of those, intangibles and those talents that it's gonna take for each of them to win this job?
Well, I think if you take we keep mentioning Zach Pyron's mobility. That's clearly his advantage. I think just right off the get go. While I think if you're Drake Lindsey, and if Drake Lindsey wins this job, I think it's going to be because he absorbed enough of what Max Brosmer was doing last year, and be able to like recognize things at the line of scrimmage and see what's in front of him. And I'm not saying he's going to be able to do it as well as Brosmer, but if he just shows the coaches that he knows what he's looking at, and that'll be huge. I think that. I mean, assuming he can still make throws, that'll probably win him the job. But then the other thing is too, he's going to have to be able to. Sorry, my headphones are dying, and they're telling me that in my ear. Uh, he's going to have to be able to make get off the first read. Whichever quarterback can progress through the reads, I think that's going to be a big factor too. We had quarterbacks here prior where we heard about where they couldn't get through more developing pass plays, and that was holding them back. But yeah, I think it's so that's I guess my answer. If Drake Lindsey wins the job, it's going to look more like an offense that we just saw with hopefully more deep shots where he can kind of read through it and he's recognizing stuff at the line. Where if Pyron wins the job, I think it's more getting the quarterback run game involved, like RPOs, like you mentioned, true read options, but still then taking some deeper shots to guys when after setting it up. So yeah, I don't think it's going to be like a drastic offense change, but that's just how I think it would play out depending on who won.
Yeah, no, I was kind of thinking along the same lines, right? Like if Lindsey can better quarterback the offense, right? Like make the right checks, make the right reads, go through all his progressions quickly, especially as a younger kid, like that's going to be pretty impressive, and it's going to show you what his projection looks like going forward too. If he keeps improving on that too, that
Right,
he might not even be at 100% of his potential, and he's still, looking like that type of player. Um, Paired with, like we said, the big arm too is always a big plus to have.
right,
Um, but yeah, for Pirate, it's like if he can use his legs to his advantage and actually, be a little more creative or make plays off script, then if he can be consistent throwing the football too, to kind of be a little more balanced at least, that he's not just a straight runner and can throw it a little bit like behind the line of scrimmage, but he can actually throw it downfield some, then like we kind of just said, if the offensive line is an issue, then that might need to be what this offense needs.
Yeah, I totally agree. I really have nothing else to add. Um, yeah, it's exciting. That's something that we'll be paying attention to here. Hopefully, we get some good insight when spring practices come up, and hopefully, they remain during the next transfer window. I'm sure that they will, but you never know. It's like the Wild West when it comes to those portals. Yeah. Well, anyway, let's change gears here a little bit, guys. Topic number two, the U of M coaches. what coaches has the most to prove this year and why? And do you think there's a coach that should be on the hot seat?
Well, I think, and this is like an evergreen statement, right? But I mean, special teams coordinator can't really do a ton worse in Bob Ligashevsky. Yeah, I think we were expecting a lot maybe last year, just a guy coming in who had NFL coaching experience and just a new face that would maybe, I don't know, change things up a little bit, but it just felt a little bit like the same old, same old. It's not all entirely his fault, but I mean, the regression of Kesich was disappointing too. Like we thought, if anything else, we at least have a kicker that's going to be stone cold, but that even wasn't the case. So I guess this year, just with new kicker, new punter coming in, another year of Parrish hopefully still being the return man. If we can see some
Yeah.
just improvement out of the special teams, just move it in the right direction would be huge. So I don't know. Bob feels like he's got the most to prove, but between the two coordinators, I think it's still Harbaugh just to see what he can do with not Max Rosemer at quarterback, and just kind of
Yeah.
see, and how his progression keeps moving. So I think he definitely got better last year, but he had the benefit of a really solid quarterback. So
That's fair. With Bob and the special teams, I just don't know. I understand it. I don't know how much we can really pin on him when your punter can only kick it at 35 yards down the field, and your kickers are in their head. So I don't know. I get the pick for
right.
sure. Like, to me, I'm holding on to well, we blocked a punt against Penn State, so that was cool. And yeah, it's not great. I think, because you brought it up, so we might as well have it again. At this point, I really think that PJ just doesn't put enough emphasis and time into special teams as a whole. But that's his one job. So Bob's got to get it done. I would maybe controversial. I feel like this guy's a fan favorite, or at least was. I'm calling him out. I'm not saying he's going to be gone or anything, but I think he's got a lot to prove, and that if this season doesn't go right, I think he could be on the hot seat. I'm going with co-offensive coordinator, receivers coach, Matt Simon. Everyone likes to bring up the 2019 year where we had Rashad Bateman, Tyler Johnson, 2 NFL wideouts. But since then, to be honest, the passing game's been pretty meh, I think a lot of people would say. And we've had total reshuffles of the receiver rooms multiple times. It feels like we can only get one fully polished receiver at a time for most of the time. I know Elijah Spencer came on this year, so last year was maybe a step in the right direction, but went from Chris Bell after 2019 to then just Daniel Jackson for a while. We haven't put together these good receiving rooms when we've had bodies. And I made a list here. I'm just going to look down at it so I don't miss what I want to say. You had TJ McWilliams, who's a former 4-star guy. Yes, he was only a redshirt freshman. He saw the competition, hit the portal, but that's another athletic player that we didn't find a way to get on the field. You had Dalen Wright from Texas A&M, who had that one touchdown catch against Ohio State and then just disappeared. Never saw him again. Kristen Hawkins hit the portal. Fleck said he's the fastest guy on the team. We never found a way to get him on the field. And then you had guys even like Michael Brown-Stevens, who I know, this one I'm not putting on Simon because we saw what this guy did with a lot of playing time. But that's another guy that was known as a speedster, and we couldn't use him really at all, except to lose to Purdue, and that was all that resulted in. So you have that track run. Then and I would even throw Corey Crooms in there, who actually had a nice career at Western Michigan before coming over here, and kind of same thing, just disappeared. Couldn't get a couldn't get a use out of them. So now we had, I got to look at the notes because these guys are all new. Javon Tracy, all MAC receiver. You got proven productive guys at the power level in Loyola out of UCLA. You got athletic freaks. Malachi Coleman out of Nebraska, right? Super fast, super tall, can jump. You got guys in year 2 here. So you got Christian Driver, guy from Penn State, athletic, shifty guy. You got big bodied guy in Tyler Williams, former 5-star out of Georgia. You know, if a good chunk of these guys can't step up this year and find a productive role on the field, and the passing attack, you know, hurts because of that, I think you got to take a hard look at moving on for Matt Simon. At a certain point, you can only reshuffle the actual personnel of the room so often. And I know we're not Ohio State, we're not Alabama or LSU who's pulling in all these high 4-star, 5-star guys in that room all the time. But like at a certain point, you got to be able to get these guys to be usable players. And I feel like there's just too many good athletes that we've seen come here, sit a year or two, maybe 3, and then head for elsewhere. And maybe that is like a player thing. We've just had really bad luck, but I don't know, man. You got to find a way to use it. I'm not saying they all got to come in and be fully polished guys like Daniel Jackson, but like find a way to use these guys' God-given talents for once. We have these big-bodied guys. Can we put them in on the red zone? Throw them a jump ball. I know that it's forbidden when you have guys like Spanford and whatever in years past, but just finding a way to use these guys to create separation down the field or in the red zone to create mismatches. If you can't do that this year with this room of players who have proven it in a variety of different ways or just have huge upside, he's got a lot of options right now. So if you can't find something to click this year, I'm ready to move on from Matt Simon because he's not doing much.
Interesting.
Yeah, I like that take, Kurt. I do, because it makes complete sense.
The coaches are going to hate this episode. Not that they listen. I'll send it to them.
Yeah, that's the fans talking.
Yeah.
I guess for me, I wanted to take kind of a good look and try and get an understanding of what was disappointing last season that you know needs to improve a little bit. I'm going with Brian Callahan, offensive line coach and the run game coordinator. Um, Historically, the Gophers have had tremendous seasons running the football. And when you have a back like Darius Taylor, you know, who got hurt, 2 seasons ago, was having a great year, coming in this next year to be the number one back, I felt that his running, and it's not all him, I just felt like it was just not really kind of what you expect out of Gopher running backs. He was great in the past. He was like our second best receiver, and that's a great, you know, tool to have. But when it
Yeah.
comes to purely running in between the tackles, it just didn't have that same oomph like it usually does. And I think that it does kind of start up front. It took a little bit for that group up front to get a little cohesion going. Uh, it felt like there was just something missing. I remember it was like the UCLA game is finally when maybe we were like, all right, maybe this is finally starting to turn to something good. But it just felt like it took too long. So I'm just looking at Coach Callahan to get these guys going and rolling right away, right off the bat. Have a solid running game all season long because that's just going to open up the passing game and make it easier for either Byron or for Lindsey here this season. So yeah, I'm going with him.
I understand the pick. I need to see what if it's another year like last year. I think I'll be with you. But to
Yeah.
me, I think he's been overall pretty solid coach, like you
Yeah.
said. So to me, I think that's more of like
It's
if you
more,
look at it like data, it's a point
yeah,
that doesn't quite correlate with the rest
right,
of it so far. Now, if it creates a trend, then I'll
right.
be right there with you.
I
But
wouldn't say that his seat is hot, but
no,
I feel like we have to just look at it and be like, all right, this was an outlier of a season here,
yeah.
and we get back on track this year. And I think
I
that they
mean,
can.
yeah, it's definitely a fair pick just because we might have 3 old linemen drafted depending what happens with Kara. I think both. Well, Ursary is definitely going to get drafted, and then I think people think that Cooper, the guard, is going to get drafted as well.
Oh,
Really. So yeah,
awesome.
it's a perplexing thing that what happened. So I don't think it's a bad choice at all.
Yeah.
Curious to see what the fans think. Am I going to get torched for that Matt Simon? I don't know.
I don't think so. I
I feel
think
like
you
the
brought
fans
up.
like him, and I'm a fan, and I don't have any issues with Matt Simon. I just we haven't developed receivers overall. I don't think
I
outside of like there's been like a one guy for like a stretch of time,
Yeah.
and you obviously want a number one, which we've had, but it's like let's get a room going here and get something cooking like we had with Bateman and Johnson. I know those guys
Right.
are NFL players, but you got to
It
be able to do
does.
something.
It just does. It is odd, and you make a good point. Like Crooms was a great, I thought, athletic receiver that kind of just disappeared, like you said. The whole deal with Brevin Spann-Ford. I mean, he could have easily been the best tight end in college football, but we just didn't use him. That
Wow,
was
then he got the
one.
drops too. Like, we
Yeah,
just
he did.
destroyed. Like it just deteriorated.
It was pretty pathetic. Yeah. And yeah, I don't know. It's just when you look at our quarterback or our receiver room, there is a lot of talent everywhere, and I think that you got to be able to utilize each player. 2019, it wasn't just Bateman and Johnson. Remember Ottman Bell? I think it was the Penn State game. Remember he had that
Yeah,
long touchdown. I mean, he was a great receiver for that
the
squad
tunnel screen.
too.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, just getting it more, players involved would be great. So I don't argue with your take, Kurt. I think it's a great point.
Well, and part of it too, though, like if you're Matt Simon, you're holding the co-offensive coordinator title and the receiver coach title, and I know these are just titles, but usually those titles are tied into getting you more money, right? And so if you're the Gophers, who are already compared to the rest of the conference, like limited, and you're taking up some of those titles, I feel like time to produce or get out. Just if we're going to be limited, like you're going to be taking up co-offense coordinator title and the receivers coach title, and we're not putting together a quality receiver effort, like more consistently at least. Because I don't think the receiver rooms have been that great, to be honest, since 2019. So last year was a step in the right direction. I will give them that. So maybe it's starting to click together. Maybe they found a system that's working. Although we didn't create any explosive plays really. We were like lowest, and we were one of the lowest in college football. So that's something that I think needs to change. I think the coaches know that. I think that's why they went out and made a big effort and got the guys that they did at the receiver position. So I'm hoping this all turns and trends in a positive direction. I think last year we asked basically the same question, and I think I picked Harbaugh. And so I think most people think, it started to go in a better direction, right? But like Max said, we had Max Brosmer last year, so now it's more proven for him. And you could really pick a lot of coaches this year with all the turnover we had. We got a new defensive coordinator, D-line coach left. Yeah, so you really could have picked anybody and gone from there. So it'll be interesting. I didn't know if one of you were just going to talk about like Fleck, but I feel like at this point with the coaches he's replaced and overall had a pretty good hit rate on. I feel like PJ's gained, at least for me, like confidence. I would say even just or like
Yeah.
trust that like he's going to pick these guys. They're in-house hires, a lot of them, not all of them, but they're in-house hires. Our running back coach actually was an outside hire too. But anyway, so he's going to let them try. They've worked up to this point, and if they're not the guy, then it's not expensive to move on from them because you didn't go out and
Right.
pay them a bunch of money to lure them away from a school. So, I mean, Danny Collins. I mean, I'm rooting for him. He sat under Rossi and under Morty for getting the guy that just left him. He's dead to me. No,
Leatherman.
Heatherman.
Heatherman,
Yeah,
yeah.
thank you. I'm just kidding. So ideally, you could get the best of both worlds there, just with more maybe fundamentally sound under Rossi, but then also a little bit more blitz heavy like under Heatherman. So I'm excited
Yeah.
to see what he can do. And he's been here a while. So And the biggest thing, I think I touched on this last pod, it's been a while, is that he has that potential loyalty to stick with PJ if he gets good
Right.
at this and that's what he wants to do. He's young, so maybe he does want to be a head coach someday. But I'm just saying, you have that potential to get your version of Phil Parker. And what I mean by that is just the loyalty aspect that's going to stick with the head coach and not leave for a side like an equal job, but just a little bit more money. He's not going to
Right.
constantly be looking for the next best high paying job. That's what the Gophers need to stay cohesive in their coaching group. So I'm excited. I think this team's got a lot going for it again. So we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah, Collins almost feels like the opposite of Simon a little bit, right? Like he's just been the consistent piece where every single year we can look to, we've got an NFL guy at safety,
Yeah.
and it's been Danny Collins the whole time, just kind of silently
Yep.
doing his thing. I think he's also the pass game coordinator on defense too now
Yes.
as well.
Yeah, I
So
think he had that title.
yeah,
Yeah. So he's had a big hand, at least in setting up the defenses for a while. And from everything Ryan Burns has talked about it too, like even back to the Joe Rossi days, like Collins was right there with him, like his right hand man, like learning and absorbing everything. So it's been in the making to get to this point for a while. So I think PJ probably wasn't having to hope to have to do it quite yet, but now he gets his chance and hopefully he runs with it. So one other thing I was going to say. Oh, and we had who's our safeties coach? He was interviewing right before we started. Eddie George got hired. He was interviewing for I think either Miami, Ohio, or Bowling Green's head coaching job. I don't remember which one.
Bowling
I think it was
Green.
Bowling Green. But so our safeties coach, who I'm blanking on, he was interviewed for that head coaching job. He didn't get it, so I presume he's back here and staying as our D-backs coach. The name's not going to come to me. But so one less turnover that we have to worry about for now.
Good. Yeah. Those are kind of our topics, fellas. Anything else for this evening?
That's all we got. If you know any good seller of Gopher football cards, preferably auto, that's been the goal. We've got some Max Williams here, Rashad Bateman, game worn jersey patches, Mo Ibram, Kamal Martin. There's more on the way. I just found out I don't like money, so I just buy stuff like this to make displays, and we'll go
Right.
from there. No, appreciate everyone that listened. I don't think Twitter worked at all. I checked it twice, and it didn't show us as live there. So appreciate you, fellas, for tuning in, and we'll be back. My goal is to get more consistent as we gear up here towards spring ball, and that's been on me. But got a kid now. Spencer's becoming a doctor. Max is trying to buy a house. So we've been busy, but appreciate you guys sticking with us.
That's right. Yeah, we thank you all for tuning in to another episode of Sky U Pod. Again, please check us out on YouTube X when it's available, and wherever you
Yeah.
listen to your podcast. So please check out our partners' website, thecollegehuddle.com, for
They're
many
also down
more.
right now.
Oh, they are. Technology. Well, guess
Yeah.
what? We're here. We're live in action. So just like and subscribe our YouTube channel. When thecollegehuddle.com is up, you can check out all the other college football podcasts out there and articles. But again, thanks as always for tuning in. Go Gophers.